Good evening. I'm Mariana Mancuso, and I'll be your host for the evening. On behalf of everyone who signed a call for American Renewal, I'd like to welcome you and our panelists to this very special event. Tonight, you'll hear from prominent current and former Republican leaders who are committed to fight for a new principled path for our country. As people begin to join us, I'd like to encourage you to share your questions and comments in the chat box. Our staff are watching the chat and paying attention to questions and comments. Later in the show, we'll have a chance to ask those questions to our panelists and speakers. Also, if you're on social media, please use the hashtag American Renewal during the event and share the live link across your channels to invite your friends. After all, the more the merrier, right? Before we dive in, though, I'd like to take a moment to offer our condolences for those who tragically passed in the Miami building collapse and pray for a swift rescue and recovery to those hurt and still missing. Tonight, we'll take the next step forward in a call for American Renewal's mission to restore common sense coalition to our political system. Without further ado, welcome to our National Town Hall.
Lies, conspiracy theories, hate, insurrection. These forces have brought down other nations, and today they cast a long shadow across our own. But this is a nation born of liberty and triumph over turmoil. And while we have at times faltered and fallen short of our own promises, we've never wavered in our resolve to make the future brighter. We've risen together, preventing our union from splitting, defeating forces of tyranny, advancing justice and equality, and even touching the cosmos. The revolution begun by our founders will continue, not by the legacy of their voice, but by the power of ours. The torch of liberty is in our hands now. We can't return to some America of old. Our purpose is greater, to renew America.
It is now my pleasure to introduce former New Jersey governor and the former administrator of the Environmental Protection Agency, Christine Todd Whitman. Tonight, Governor Whitman, will share her thoughts on how we reform our political system.
Good evening. I'm Christy Whitman, former governor of New Jersey, and I want to welcome you to tonight's town hall for a call for American Renewal. You are joining a group of people who feel desperately afraid of where our country is going at the moment. We believe in the founding principles that make this country so special and so great. We are largely Republicans or independents, former Republicans largely, and we are worried about our party in particular, but overall in the tenor of the dialogue in this country. And so what we've formed is a series of principles which I hope you've had the opportunity to read. I can't say as I think any of them are terribly controversial. Respect for the rule of law and the Constitution, the desire to have the truth, ethics in government, a support and protection of our natural environment, pluralism. These are all things on which this country was founded and used to be centerpieces of the Republican Party. But now we see a party that is not based on principle, but on personality, the personality of one person. And what that's led to is a group of people who are constantly repeating the big lie, that the 2020 election was stolen. We know it was not stolen. In fact, there were over 60 court cases brought across the country to challenge the outcome of that election, some heard by Republican judges, others heard by Democrat judges, and every single one of them turned aside because there was no there. But what's happening by people continuing to spread that lie is that people are doubting their government. And it's allowing for legislatures, mostly Republican, passing pieces of legislation that would take oversight of the ballot away from those who were elected and trained to oversee the ballot and putting them in the hands of partisan legislatures. And still other laws that vastly restrict access to the ballot, particularly for people of color. That's just unacceptable in our democracy, and it's not what the Republican Party certainly used to be about. It's not what we need in a center-right party. And so we ask you to read those principles. Think about joining us as members of this effort. It's not to establish a third party, not right away, not unless we have to, but it's about bringing the Republican Party back to where it used to be so we can stand up and be proud of who we are and what this means, I deeply worry about the future of this country. I think January 6th was just a small example of what can happen when people lose that faith in their government, don't believe any of it. And we should be prepared that more of that can happen. And that's just unacceptable. We need to stand together. We should renew our pledge to the American people and to this country. It's the best in the world, in spite of all its faults. And it's got faults because we're all human. But it is worth every effort that we can make to try to salvage what we have and been given. I mean, Benjamin Franklin said it best when asked what sort of a government he'd given us and they'd given us, and he said, "A republic if you can keep it." And Abraham Lincoln indicated that if we were to lose our form of government, it would only come from within. Now is the time to ensure that we're not going to let that happen, that we are going to stand up and we're going to renew American values.
Thank you, Governor. In a recent poll, 62% of Americans said they didn't feel represented by either party, and half of all Americans now define themselves as independents. Tonight's first panel will discuss the state of our political landscape and how we return to principles-based governing. Joining us now, political strategist, tech founder, and campaign manager for Joe Walsh's Republican presidential primary challenge to Donald Trump, Lucy Caldwell. Welcome, Lucy. She'll lead our first panel to discuss with former governor and presidential candidate Bill Weld and two former members of Congress, Barbara Comstock and Charlie Dent.
Thank you so much, Mariana. It's great to be with you all tonight and to be joined by Congresswoman Comstock, Congressman Dent, and former Massachusetts Governor Bill Weld. Governor Weld, I want to start with you. You and I have something in common. And I think, in a way, you've done more for American democracy and really a bid for American decency than almost anyone I know. You and I spent time waving to each other in Iowa in your own challenge in 2020 in challenging Donald Trump. And that was on the heels of really sticking your neck out in 2016 as well. So you are a person, Governor Weld, who certainly has thought about what the future of the Republican Party is, whether there is a Republican Party in the future that does not involve Donald Trump. And as we think about where we've been and where we're going, I'd love to open it up to you, Governor Weld, to give your take on what's ahead and what's coming for the party as we look to a post-Trump future.
Well, Lucy, we certainly tried. I'm not sure how far we got in the head-to-head contest against Mr. Trump in 2019 and 20. But I view the situation now as more serious than it was then. Right now, we've got a whole lot of people in Washington who are office holders who can only be described, it's a tough word, but as cowards, because they're more motivated by fear of getting primaried and losing their seats than they are about just absolutely lying bald-faced to the American people. It occurs to me that Richard Nixon was president of the United States twice elected, and he got caught lying to the American people once, and it was about a break-in at the Watergate Hotel. It wasn't about who won the last election, and he was gone in 2 weeks. We need to come back to that.
Congresswoman Comstock, I want to bring you into this because I've heard you say, I'm a Catholic and I'm a Republican. There are problems with my church and there are problems with my party, but I'm sticking with it. And I want to kind of expand on that perspective as you look at kind of the reality of a Republican base where, upwards of 50% of Republicans now believe that maybe the election was stolen from Donald Trump. We see the way that members like Liz Cheney have been drummed out of party leadership. How do you keep the faith as you keep the faith in a future Republican Party that there's something to stick with it and build ahead in contrast to some other perspectives of folks in this group, perhaps?
Well, sure. Well, I take confidence in the fact that 66% of Americans do not want Donald Trump to run for president again. So even if a majority of Republicans do, he cannot win. And so I think, simple math shows that, even if the party wants to support a loser, he is still a loser. He's, of course, a very sore loser. So I think as the days and the weeks and the months go by, more and more people are going to realize that he's a sore loser and he's focused in the past. When they had the CPAC, the Conservative Political Action Committee event down in Florida, basically as a Donald Trump pep rally, he only got 55% from his own family gathering. And now you reportedly have his own family, Ivanka and Jared, trying to stay away from him. So you can see where that 55% may even include some of his own family members, reportedly. So I do think his power is dissipating, even if we still have a majority sticking with him. And I do think many elected officials understand that. Now, they would like to just have him go away. I've said, if he disappeared tomorrow, I do not think you'd have many elected Republicans in the search party trying to find him. In fact, you already have many Republicans starting up their presidential campaign stories today. So I do think he is the past, and I am confident that if we all stick together and keep chipping away, that he will be the past sooner rather than later.
Congressman Dent, I want to bring you into this conversation to talk about what some of the perils may be that not just members of Congress, and of course, in your work at the Aspen Institute and as ED of the congressional program there, you're talking to these folks all the time, but also in general, what are the perils for everyday Republicans and everyday conservatives and independents in thinking about what the way forward is? This week there was some news that there were rumblings that Donald Trump is thinking about finding a way to become Speaker of the House as a non-elected speaker, right? And there's this risk, of course, that sticking with the Republican Party, you may be sticking with a majority that is a would-be majority that is thinking about ways to shoehorn Donald Trump back into power. So when you're thinking about these issues and thinking about the perspective of someone like Governor Weld and Congresswoman Comstock, how do you think about what the right way to navigate that is?
Well, my quick take on this, and I appreciate what my two colleagues have said here, Barbara Comstock and Governor Weld, that I think ignoring Donald Trump has been a mistake. I never called myself a never Trumper, but I'm a non-Trumper. I don't like where he is. And look, he's a diminished figure, but although he's still dangerous and destructive. Having said all that, I do wish more of my former colleagues would speak up more forcefully. I think ignoring the former president has hurt us because he's been able to dominate the airwaves and the message. Many Republican base voters were never hearing an alternative message from I think more thoughtful, more rational people who know better and who are in high positions of elected office. That has been the key. So what we need more than anything else, in my view, is a grassroots movement of people who will call their congressmen, Republican congressmen, and say, yes, we want you to push back. Give them, they need reinforcements. I'm not walking out of the Republican Party. I'm not going to abandon people like Adam Kinzinger and Liz Cheney and Peter Meyer and Fred Upton and others, who've shown a lot of courage, and Mitt Romney and plenty of, and several others, Susan Collins. I'm not going to walk away from them. They need support now. But we need to build this movement of Republicans or former Republicans. That they say there's close to 30% who are not happy with the Trumpian direction of the party and all the isms that Trumpism brings. The isolationism, the protectionism, the cronyism, the nihilism, the nativism, the ugly populism. I don't like to make it about Donald Trump, but it's about what he stood for in many cases. And I have many friends who say, well, I don't like him, but I like what he stood for. And when I start talking about, well, embrace Russia, well, no, you like the protectionism and the cronyism, well, no. And then you start peeling back the onion. They don't always like all the things that he was doing in office either from a policy standpoint when you get beyond maybe the tax reductions and some of the regulatory relief. That's where I think we have to start making an argument. But there needs to be a grassroots movement to reinforce these members of Congress, to help them find their voices. They will. They need somebody to back them up because right now they're hearing from one side and they're shell-shocked.
Sure. Congresswoman Comstock, a person who's watching right now, Kevin in Virginia, asked, what can we do about the misinformation and misinformation mindedness that has taken root in the Republican Party? And you're ever the optimist. So I want to start with you, and then I want to bring Governor Weld's voice into this. What can we do about the misinformation and the misinformation mindedness today? What can folks watching at home do right now while they're tweeting about this town hall?
Well, first, that's why I've been a very strong proponent of a January 6th investigation. Again, we have to, while we need to move to the future, we have to get that misinformation from the past that Donald Trump has created and deal with that directly. And I think that would involve things like having the Trump White House subpoenaed, having people like Mark Meadows and all the people that were part of organizing that January 6th rally, and the president's appearance there that day, all the things that went on that day. The Democrats actually should have already subpoenaed these phone records, the texts, and all the information that was going on. So I think it's very important to get those facts out. And then we individually, whenever I have people, because a lot of people, because they've been fed lies for months now, 7-8 months, they don't know the truth. And so you need to very, fact by fact, explain to them why these things are lies. I would recommend, CNN had a great piece this week, a 2-hour piece on January 6th. I know people who didn't even know, elected officials who didn't even know about the Hang Mike Pence going on in the Capitol. People need to understand what happened that day, and that's why that investigation needs to be done ASAP.
Governor Weld, what would you say to that?
I think Charlie Dent put his finger on it. We've got to give all those cowardly lions in Washington, the office holders who are lying to the American people about who won the election, an incentive not to lie. And we don't do that, but we won't do that by delivering a message. They'll never listen to that. They're so scared. We've got to deliver a blow. And the blow is making it obvious to those office holders that there's, pick a number, 15% of people who usually vote Republican who won't tolerate lying to the American people and a lack of decency. We make that stick, and that's the grassroots movement that we're all talking about here with the renewing America and America's spirit. Then that'll be delivering a blow they'll have to listen to. And that will change behavior.
Congressman Dent, this week, Liz Cheney put out in the universe that one of the big pieces that she sees missing is sort of civic education, even among members of Congress, right? A lack of respect for the Constitution, a lack of understanding about, the 3 branches of government, the rule of law. I tend to be a little bit skeptical of that because, of course, you can also see examples of people like Josh Hawley or Ted Cruz or, folks coming up among candidates, people like J.D. Vance, who we know are very clear about what they're saying and know better. So what's the right way? What's the right path, Congressman Dent, in navigating, is there a fix? Is that the fix? Is it that more education of members is needed, or is it something more deeply rooted in our communities that grassroots movement needs to sort of have their eye on the prize about as they figure out how to talk to their friends and family and neighbors and coworkers about the possibility of a better way?
Well, I do commend Liz Cheney for going on her one-woman civic education tour, which obviously is very needed, although I'm not sure how successful that mission will be. What I would argue for, however, is that, we need to, again, create space for these members and talk about what it means to be a center-right or common sense conservative. And I think that we maybe should think about somebody like an Edmund Burke. And, I've always thought that, if you're a Republican, you want to be more measured statements, discipline, stability, order. These are things in incremental change. These are things that a lot of center-right and I would say common sense conservative people would embrace. And that's where we need to be as a party. And this is where I think the Trumpian movement has really taken us into a very dark place. I mean, he was always about disruption for the sake of disruption. All this, always stoking it in anger. The victimhood. Frankly, I always thought Democrats were better at being victims than Republicans. Then came Donald Trump, and you would think, a billionaire, a wealthy guy was the ultimate victim to listen to him. And this is not where we were as a Republican Party. They use the term establishment in a disparaging way. But, I grew up in a community where, the people who sat on the boards of the YMCA or the local hospitals or the local schools or the nonprofits were small business people, professionals. Many of them were Republican. They were invested in their communities, not just financially, but emotionally. They were committed. And yeah, they were part of an establishment, but they believed in their communities. They don't want to blow them up. They don't want to stoke this anger. And I think we've got to get back to a place where we can, make our party safe for people like that. And that's why we're losing in the suburbs so badly. A lot of these people in the suburbs, again, they're part of an established community. They're invested in many ways. And, we need to, if we look like a group of people who just are stoking anger and, grievance based on, in the case of Trump, and I would often say, by the way, that Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders are two different sides of the same coin. They both appeal to an anger. Trump on a cultural level, it was the Mexicans, the Muslims, the Chinese. That's why your life is bad. Bernie Sanders says it's economically based. It's the CEOs, it's the drug companies, it's the oil companies, it's the banks. You hear all that, but they're all playing to an anger. And most leaders should be standing up there trying to tamp that down. Particularly the leader of a party. Your job is to try to tamp down that anger, which has always existed in this country. I mean, this is not new. Anger in politics has been around since the beginning of the republic. What's different is when the top leader of the party is out there stoking it. That's a dangerous thing. And I think we have to, again, create the space for these members to find their voice, to push back. But they need grassroots help.
You're tapping into something that really dovetails well with a question that Tamara M. asked ahead of this town hall. You're talking about the aspect of this system, which is that, parties themselves often go to extremes, right? We all know from the work that is being done around the country that parties themselves, the primary process, can become quite polarizing. And it is very, very hard for a third party to get a foothold. And Tamara M. asked, given that the current system in our country is so antithetical to a multi-party system, and really a sense that both parties are kind of committed to a power sharing duopoly of sorts, how can any other group or coalition influence our current system in a meaningful way? That is, in a way that would influence not just the politically informed, but the millions of low information voters. And Governor Weld, I want to start with you on this because you've had some adventures over the years, including running on the Libertarian ticket in 2016 as part of the kind of pushback against Trumpism. How should people think about ways they can or cannot use those avenues, whether it's a third party or a coalition? This group has come together around this call for American Renewal. What do you see the trajectory and what are the opportunities for people trying to think about how to break up that traditional kind of horrible primary fight, the duopoly that we see that dominates our political system?
Right. I mean, I would agree with the premise of the question, which is that the duopoly is kind of a diseased death spiral mutual embrace of two parties who need each other because they exist only for the purpose of hating each other in Washington. So I don't think that we as Americans should feel that we owe either party a living. And when you see a party behaving the way a majority of Republicans are now, that's particularly true. But I go back to what we're here about, the call for American renewal. If we can demonstrate through the grassroots that there are, say, 15%, 20% of the people who care more about truth and decency, which are plainly lacking in the people who are lying about who won the election, than they do about that incumbent keeping his or her seat, then we're on our way. And there may be some collateral damage. Some people may lose their seats. When you strike a blow, some people may lose their seats. It's not the end of the world. It could be the beginning of a transition, which I think would be healthy for our democracy.
Congresswoman Comstock, what's your take on that?
I think a good approach is to focus on candidates, at whatever level. Oftentimes at the state and local level, there's smaller races. So if you work with those candidates who share your values and want to, get back to these principles, you can, get out there and knock on doors. I mean, every race that I had, I ran for the State House 3 times before I ran for Congress, and I wasn't supposed to win any of those races, but I knocked on 10,000 doors. I talked to people one-on-one. I had my own, brand and issues that I wanted to work on. Yes, I was a Republican. Yes, I don't like things like tax increases, but you're listening to your constituents and talking to them. And oftentimes I'd get Democrats to support me and independents, and I'd bring together my own coalition. So I think each candidate needs to find their coalition, and it's harder than to just go in and stamp the whatever issues, on the extremes of each party. But if you do a little bit more work and harder than, the average guy, you can break through this, particularly at the lower level. And then that gives you an opportunity for building a new party and new leaders. And that's what I focus on now, getting more women elected, getting more minorities elected in the Republican Party, and getting them more at that grassroots level so that we have new faces with new ideas, turn the page, get away from the ugliness we've seen the past few years.
Congressman Dent, something that the way that Congresswoman Comstock just answered that makes me think about how there's a sense a little bit, I think, that the battle in the so-called Never Trump movement, or the kind of the war being waged, or the fight being waged by Republicans, former Republicans, independents, who are not just sort of like hip with MAGA, right? That they tend to talk in terms of sort of grand pronouncements about our democracy, when for so many Americans, the issues really that they're thinking about every day are about sort of everyday governance. And that's a hard perspective to keep. But both Adam R. and James J. sent in questions really about how to lower the volume of voices on the far edges of the political spectrum generally. And the way James J. put it was, how do we get the country back to governing instead of worrying about which party wins and which party loses? Being constantly divided on every issue is a gift to the enemies of the United States and democracy. Congressman Dent, I wonder if you see it that way, if there is this kind of need to get back to everyday democracy, everyday federalism, perhaps. We haven't heard that term in a while. What's the way forward? Should we start talking about issues more? What do you think?
Well, let me just start by saying, when I was in Congress with Barbara Comstock, she and I were part of what I call the governing wing of the Republican Party. And sadly, too few of us were part of that wing, because the incentives in our political system are all wrong. Barbara and I, and certainly Governor Weld did too, we all represented districts, or state in this case, where there were more Democrats than Republicans, certainly in my district, but Barbara had a swing district. But we just couldn't play base politics to win. And many members find their political safety is catering hard to fringe elements of the base. That's where they need to maintain that in order to win their primaries, because they don't have competitive general elections. But for those of us who actually lived in tough areas where we needed to win a lot of independents and a significant number of Democrats as well as Republicans to win our elections, we had a different political calculation. And so that allowed us to govern. Our political safety was closer to the center. So we had to appeal to that. Just playing base politics, we would lose. If Governor Weld, all he ever did was just appeal to the Republican base in Massachusetts, he would have never been governor. And same with Barbara in the suburbs of Virginia, Loudoun County, and those areas. No way. And same with me in the Lehigh Valley of Pennsylvania. So I think that's a big part of the problem. And one final point I wanted to make on this is that our political system does not have an outlet like Europe does. Europe has, in the UK, you would call them classical liberals, or the Liberal Party. In Germany, they're called the Free Democrats. People who are free market oriented. We're not talking like American liberalism, but we're talking free market oriented, socially tolerant, constructively engaged on the international stage. And frankly, in the United States, those people found a home fairly comfortably for much of our history in the Republican Party and some in the Democratic Party. Now, this whole group of people that I would label from center right to center left on the spectrum really feel like they are terribly underrepresented in Congress by both parties. Again, because most of these members in both parties are in safe seats, and they just have to cater to a base in order to win nomination. And then, of course, and then they win the election. But so few of us represented relatively competitive areas. So it's the way we have a primary problem, the way we nominate people, enables very fringe candidates to win in multi-candidate primaries and ultimately break through. That is a great challenge. And that's how you get the Marjorie Taylor Greenes of the world and others, who become congressmen or women in some cases. And the same thing happens on the left.
Well, thank you so much. We are just getting so many great questions, and I wish we had time for all of them. I wish we'd had time to get to this question from Timothy S. about what would we advise young would-be conservatives and independents who are coming of age in the age of Trump to do when they don't want to be a part of where the Republican Party is today. And I'm lucky to be a 30-something, so I came up in a very different time. I would say keep logging on to events like this, Timothy S. Keep trying to find your tribe. Thank you so much to Governor Weld, to Congresswoman.
To get behind, because a couple of examples will build us up.
You're right. Thank you, Congresswoman Comstock. Thank you, Congressman Dent. Thank you again, Governor Weld. We'll hand it back to you, Mariana. Thanks so much, you guys.
Thank you, Lucy, Governor Weld, Congresswoman Comstock, and Congressman Dent for your insights. They were absolutely invaluable. Now we will go to former Congressman Charles DeJoux and 2020 presidential candidate Joe Walsh.
Hi, this is Charles DeJoux. I'm a former member of Congress and served in the U.S. House as a Republican. We know that the presidency under Donald Trump has been extraordinarily erratic and selfish. And the Republican Party today, unfortunately, has lost its way with populism and Trumpism. But to exercise Trumpism and his brand of selfish, irresponsible government from the Republican Party, from American politics, requires more than just defeating Donald Trump in the presidency. It requires us to win elections. And to win elections, it requires us to do more than just defend the center-right conservatives who stood up to Donald Trump, whether it be Liz Cheney from Wyoming or Adam Kinzinger from Illinois or Tom Rice from South Carolina. It requires the movement to do more and go on the offense, to actually win elections by defeating incumbents who pledge loyalty to the paragon of sore losers, Donald Trump. So while it is important to have principles, while it is important to have good ideas, to be relevant in American politics requires us to go out and win elections. And I think this is the essential next step that needs to be done to confront those unwilling to confront Donald Trump and Trumpism, and to kick them out of office in order to have influence and in order to restore a sense of balance and reasonableness in American politics today. And I hope you'll join us.
Hey, this is former Congressman Joe Walsh. It is great to be with you. No time for small talk. Let's cut right to it. Look, we're right. We know we're right. We know we're principled. We know that we're on the side of the angels. We know that we're with our founding fathers, but none of that means squat now. Right now, it's all about doing. It's all about doing something. It's all about fighting to save this country, fighting to save the rule of law, fighting to save democracy. That's what we have to do right now. That's what we're called to do right now. Man, we need to support principled candidates. We need to get independents elected. We need to get reasonable, rational Republicans elected. We need to maybe start a third party. We maybe need to grow a bunch of independents. I don't know, but we need to do. We have a country to save. This battle has just begun. I'm an old guy. I'm an old white guy, guys. You who are listening to me, who are younger, this is going to be a long battle. Let's quit talking and let's start doing. Let's fight, all of us, and I know you are. Let's fight to save this democracy. You in? I am. Thanks.
Thank you, Congressman DeJoux and Congressman Walsh, for those energetic words and advice. I'm really excited for the next portion of this town hall. We will hear from our second panel, led by public policy leader and best-selling author Miles Taylor. But first, we're excited to announce some big news, which our panel will discuss. We hope you will share this announcement far and wide.
For nearly 250 years, America has faced struggle and endured. From an upstart colony to the world's greatest democracy, we've faltered, we've fought, and we've overcome. But some are ready to give it all up, to cast it aside, for fear, for lies, and for the glitter of false promises. But not all that glitters is gold. Real treasures take hard work to refine. Buried in the scars and the cracks and the rust is something else. Character. Just waiting for the next generation to discover and refine it for themselves. The work of continuing this great nation rests in our hands now. Can't let imposters be the authors of our story, or fall under the sway of people who'd rather deceive than discover. We must strip back the paint, straighten the crooked lines, and renovate this democracy ourselves, so that we can pass it on to the next generation, not merely repaired, but renewed. Join us.
Well, thank you everyone for joining us. We are extremely excited to make this announcement tonight. We are launching formally the new organization, the Renew America movement. Now, before we go to our panel, I want to give you a little bit of insight on where this came from. And I want to start by saying it came from you. After the January 6th insurrection against our capital, against the citadel of democracy, we heard from people like you that they wanted an organization, a movement, and a tribe for the politically tribeless to get the extremism out of our politics. We've held months of meetings behind the scenes with brass tops leaders, former governors, senators, congressmen, party leaders, and people at the grassroots to talk about what that should look like, to talk about what we do to actually follow through on what Congressman Joe Walsh just said. Actually do something. Let's stop talking about it. So last month, we issued a call for American renewal. It was 150 plus prominent leaders from our country that said, we need to do something more. We need to stop talking about what we're against and start talking about what we are for. And so we listed key principles like truth and constitutionalism and democracy that we believed public servants needed to abide by, especially when we look at extremist elements in the Republican Party. And this month, we are proud to announce the organization that's going to bring the rubber to the road, an organization that you can be involved in. So let me tell you briefly what we're trying to do. The Renew America movement is going to focus on, first, restoring a common sense coalition to our politics. Second, we're going to focus on defeating extremists. That's right, getting out there in the races and defeating those people who don't stand for the rule of law and our Constitution and our democracy. We're also going to put forward a better and more hopeful and more unifying vision for this country. And we want to rally you at the grassroots to join us in that effort. And then finally, and I hope some of you listening tonight will take this under consideration, we want to recruit and support the next generation of principled candidates around this country that will stand up for those values, that will fight for democracy, and will help restore sanity to our political system. We are not just Republicans. We are not independents. We are not just Democrats of conscience, although we're glad to have that big tent. We are renewers. We are a new movement. We are a new consumer brand identity for our politics, and we are a new tribe for the tribeless in the American political system. And we would love for you to join us. So before we go into the next panel, if you've got another computer open on the side here, we would love for you to go to our website, www.renewamericamovement.com, and help join us in the fight. So with that, we're going to jump into a panel discussion with some people I really look up to and admire. The first, Michael Steele, the former chairman of the Republican National Committee, Denver Riggleman, a former congressman from Virginia, and Susan Del Percio, a noted political strategist and someone who's a fast talker, a fun talker, and has a very incisive view on our political system. So Chairman Steele, I want to start with you tonight, and I want to get to some of the questions that we've received. So I've got a question here from Susan Kay, who asks, what is your strategy to keep people like Marjorie Taylor Greene out of office? Chairman?
Well, first off, exciting news about the Renew America movement. Spread it far and wide, folks. This is an opportunity to engage in a way that we haven't seen in a long, long time. And it really kind of goes to the heart of the answer to the question about not just Marguerite Taylor Greene specifically, but the broader effort to push back against those who do not stand with democracy. This is not about standing with Michael Steele or Miles Taylor or Susan. This is about standing for our country. It's about making a clear choice for the kind of country we want and the kind of leaders we want to lead that country, to lead that county, to lead that state, to lead that community. And so what I've always done is just call them out. Number one, you got to call the thing what it is. You can't pretend that it's something that it's not. These people aren't Republicans. They're not conservatives. In some cases, they're not even in the same hemisphere of reality related to what American politics has been about. So I think it's important, first off, to call the thing what it is. Secondly, to your point, Miles, about what this movement is about, let's identify and push to the fore those men and women of good heart, of good conscience, who stand with democracy, push them forward and give them the support and the megaphone that they need so that their voices are heard. What our politics is denigrated into is this cavalcade of noise in the corner of the room. And what we need to do is to shut that noise down by raising up the voices of those who believe in what this country's all about. E pluribus unum, we the people. This is the opportunity to do that.
Spot on, Chairman. And I've got a somewhat related follow-on question for Congressman Denver Riggleman here. ONC asks, how will you ensure that local and state voices are heard in the movement? People at that level who want to get involved here and be in the fight. And Congressman, you live in the Commonwealth of Virginia. You're a man of the people. How would you say that we activate those folks and get them engaged?
I think, first of all, having a movement like this helps, where we can rally behind sort of this tribe of the factually confrontational, right? We've got to do this. And we got to support those individuals at the local and state levels, not only with what we have as an organization and all of us who've gone through it, but also with resources, right? And I think that's what people are looking for, is not only this sort of bedrock of ideology that doesn't rest on one human being or belly crawling, right, to some other location to actually pay subservience, but it's about people that actually believe in a construct, and that construct is freedom. That construct is his ability to have free thinking people out there that are using facts and rationality and common sense rather than disinformation or misinformation that flows over social media. So I think at this point right now, with the individuals we have on this call, and my goodness, I mean, you can't ask for better people, right, with higher moral character, is that if we have these moral people that are out there helping these people at the local and state levels, I think we can do very well, and I'm happy to be a part of it.
Great, Congressman. Susan, I've got a question for you, and then I'm gonna put a question to this entire panel. But first, Chris P. asks, the structural barriers to either reforming the Republican Party or launching a third party seem almost insurmountable. What is the way forward you see to accomplish one of these goals, or perhaps both of these goals?
Well, American Renewal movement. That means it's new. It means we're starting from the ground up. Miles, you had me at Grassroots. So what people need to do is get involved at that grassroots level. You may not identify with the Republican Party in your county or town, but join it anyway. Have your voice start matter. Also, try and become an election worker. I mean, it's an experience in itself. It's patriotic, and it also keeps the process honest. We can do things at 3 feet versus 30,000 feet that can really change this country. So yes, a third party, I do believe, is a tremendous challenge. It doesn't mean it can't happen, but to be viable, it would have to take many years. It doesn't mean you can't support a third party candidate, though, in a local race. It doesn't mean you can't rally around someone who has good values that represent you, even if it's not part of either party. And then on top of that, I think it's really important to get as many people voting as possible. We talk about these primaries and how people just run, whether it's on the left or the right. But here's the thing, if the more people participate in those primaries, more people come out to vote, then the more diverse the ideas have to be, because they have to have a greater appeal to maybe more moderates, or in my opinion, sane thinkers. So that's how you start to get out some of the extremist candidates. But it's going to take a little while, and we've got to be able to spend the time to do it.
That's a great point, Susan. And I actually want to jump to a live question that we just had come in that I'm going to take moderator prerogative on. Catherine B. asks, how will these candidates run under the Renew America banner? As Democrats, as independents, as Republicans? Catherine, I'm glad you asked that question, because I'll tell you that the Renew America movement's primary focus at the outset is going to be excising the extremism from the Republican Party. So we're going to run a number of candidates and support a number of candidates that are good Republicans, that support our democracy, or are running against radical Republicans. That's going to be a top priority. But it doesn't stop there, because we're going to have renewers running as candidates as independents. And in some cases, when we have principled moderate Democrats running against extremists, we're going to go be in those races and support the pro-democracy Democrat over the Republican who wants to abrogate the rule of law and work against our Constitution. So that's how we're looking at this as a movement. We want to deepen the pro-democracy bench across the spectrum, and that's what we're going to try to do. But now I want to jump to the question I want to put to this entire panel. We've had a number of individuals already say to us they are eager to join as renewers. We've got a lot of voters watching tonight. You are part of the tribe now. We welcome you as renewers. Some of you also have asked about running for office. You're eager to run for office. We're eager to urge you to run for office. So I want to ask this panel, in this environment, it's one of the most difficult environments to get involved in public life. The social media vitriol, the threats. We've had a number of questioners ask, what should they be thinking about before deciding to run for office in this really turbulent, contentious, and personal environment? Chairman Steele, I'd love to start with you.
Yeah, I have counseled and worked with candidates going back to my early days as a young county chairman here in Prince George's County, Maryland. And I'll tell you now what I would say to a candidate then in 1994. If you are not prepared to be you, then don't do this. If you're not prepared to stand on a principle and a set of values that mean something, don't do this. If you're not prepared to stand up in the face of those around you who are trying to get you to move against those values and those principles, don't do this. Because if you are not you, the rest of the system will tear what's left of you up, and it has no meaning and no value to voters. That's our problem right now inside the GOP. The grift, the power surge, the power grab, I got to get the clicks, I'm going to go out and say something stupid, and next thing you know, I'll be trending on Twitter. That's not leadership. So if you're not prepared to stand up and stand for something, sit down and shut up until you learn how to stand up, until you learn how to be a servant leader. Those two words are powerful. You've heard Congressman Dent, Congresswoman Barbara Comstock, my buddy Denver Riggleman. These are men and women who have put it on the line for their country, who've put it on the line for their community, and have taken a lot for doing that. All right? So if you're not prepared to stand that way, this is not the space you want to be in right now. This renewal movement is not just about, oh, gee, we want to, run and get into office. No, this is about so much more than that. This is about renewing our values, our commitment to our country, our families, our communities through servant leadership. So those of you who are thinking about running this fall, running next fall, being in a cycle now or in the future, start with yourself and ask yourself the hard questions. And if you can't answer those, don't do this.
Great points, Chairman. And I think a good segue to Congressman Riggleman, who has, he has lived it. He fought in Congress and said the truth and showed an extraordinary amount of courage. And also, Chairman, you talk about going viral. Denver Riggleman goes viral anytime he tweets. So I'd encourage folks, if they're not following him on Twitter, we'd slap a PG-13 or maybe an R rating on his Twitter. But Congressman, I'm curious to hear from you. What would you recommend to these people who want to jump into the fight and actually run and knock out some of these radicals?
Yeah, I was talking to Chairman Steele in D.C. not too long ago, and I hope he didn't already forget. But I told him how much I despised running for office, right? I wasn't in politics. I didn't come in until, 2017 or so. So a lot of people who might be amazed at my incredible political acumen, just think about that. I won and lost in just a couple years, really great at it. But I think what you have to do is you have to have courage. I think if you go in wanting to run as a career rather than as service, I think you're already backsliding into being what other people want you to be rather than standing on your own. And what I've seen is that people who want to be politicians all the way through, or that's the only thing that they can sort of see themselves doing, those are the individuals that seem to be the most easily malleable, right? You can move them anywhere you want. And even though I knew I was saying some things that were going to get me in trouble and doing some things that I thought were very correct when it came to liberty or marriage equality, or when I was going against QAnon or conspiracy theories, I still thought I could win. And they had to do some pretty crazy things to beat me. So now I see what's going on here. And what's going on here is when you have a movement so I want to call it RAM. I know you want to call it Renewers, but I like the RAM acronym, right? I'm a military guy, right? Renew America movement, right? But when you have a bunch of people ramming into sort of the wall of disinformation and ramming into that wall of individuals that would rather use hyperbole to raise money and lead people down the wrong path because America's not important to them, that's the people that we have to fight. And that's why I'm so happy to hear Chairman Steele. It's hard to even overcome or to say any more on what Chairman Steele said about what we need to be as people and politicians.
Well, Susan, before I go to you, I'm going to foot stomp what the congressman just said. And, if people are excited about the ram, the animal, the ram being a symbol of this movement, we encourage you to repost pictures of rams, make T-shirts. Maybe we'll have some on our website very soon. In fact, I think we're going to have some merchandise with Rams and Denver Riggleman's face. So,
hey, Denver.
Great. I already have trouble with animals, man.
See, Denver, there you go again, baby.
Exactly. So, Susan, I want to go to you and ask, look, you have been in the trenches of some of the most important political fights in this country, and your analysis has really cut through some of the most consequential debates that we've had. You've seen politics at all levels. What would you do to encourage people to get into the fight and think about running for office around the country in these coming cycles?
Well, definitely listen to Chairman Steele and Congressman Riggleman. I mean, they are right on the money of what you need to have in yourself to run. But let me give you some practical advice as well. You need to want this more than anything else in this moment in time. You have to be prepared to give it your all because you're going to take your knocks. But also look for opportunities. For example, in New York State, there was a primary. The mayor of Buffalo, 4 terms elected, was never going to lose his primary except for the night that he did. Why? Because he got lazy. So look at those races that maybe you want to take on. Look at the races that interest you. If you don't want to be a part of a state legislature, don't run for the state legislature. I mean, sometimes it's that simple. Look at your network. Look at your strengths. Look at whether it's working in charities or what you do for a living, what you can bring to the table. And then make that decision to go out there and knock on every door that you can. Speak to as many people as possible. If you're running against the party and you want to run a primary, go for it. People love underdogs, just so you know. And you'll be surprised. I mean, you share that you're running for your local city council with this network, you're going to get a lot of support, I would think. So there are people willing to back you as long as you really want to do it. And just look at this as an opportunity to not just serve your country, but also yourself, because obviously there's something that's driving you, but make sure you really want it.
Susan, so well said. Chairman, I have another question that's come in for you. Peter H. asks, what will you do to make me feel welcome as an American, even though I am not a Christian? The mainstream Republicans never did that.
And that's unfortunate. And it was a trend line that I tried my best to resist as national chairman. It pleaded with state party chairmen and national committee men and women to recognize that the strength of our party was not up here, but as Susan laid out, it's here at the grassroots. It's where people are every day. When you knock on that door, when you see someone, that's the representational moment, right? Where you get to share your values as a Republican, as a conservative, as a moderate, whatever your philosophical, ideological presentation happens to be. But we've moved off of that. And so what I would say to you is you now have a new home. You've got this movement. You've got fellow travelers who believe in a like-minded way, not just in the spirit and the idea of America, but will actually act on that spirit and promote that idea in a way in which all are welcome. Our system, and I want to be very clear about this, and Denver knows this from his own experience as an elected official, our system is not designed for this to happen. Our system is not designed for any of this to happen. And the fact that it is says more about you than anything else. So understand that you're already in the game, folks. The three most powerful words our founders ever put pen and paper to were "we the people."
Miles, I just want to add one thing.
Go ahead.
People don't realize just how much Chairman Steele brought to the table when he was the head of the party. He was so inspiring. And you see in even blue states like New York, bringing different people there. And that is so lacking now. And I'm so happy to see that he's part of that, because you brought so much energy. I mean, it affected me in a personal way, even though I didn't know you at the time. And, you know, as a woman, and I'm not Christian either, I look at the party and I said, oh my gosh, like we were starting to go there under Michael Steele. What the heck happened? And Michael, you're right. This is a new place to start.
This is a new place to start. And I appreciate that very much, Susan. And you know, for the questioner, look, you have a home where people are. And you know, that's something the Republican Party's forgotten. Now it's all about whether or not you check the appropriate box on Trump or check the appropriate box on some other crazy from Matt Gaetz or something. That's not a party. That's not a movement. That's not even good, bad, or indifferent politics. It's just out there crazy. So don't try to get into that. Don't just keep walking past it. You have a space now in which you can feel a part and be a part of something that's going to speak to your better instincts, if you will, to where you'd like to go as a citizen. And so don't fret on that any longer. That's what Miles was saying a little bit ago. It's a new day and it's going to be done in a new way. And that's a good thing. But we do know the system is not designed to let this happen. And the fact that it is, and that there's more to come, is a good thing. You're in a good space at the right time.
Well, and that leads, Chairman, I think, to a great question that I want to put to Congressman Rickleman about, you know, who's going to be a RAM? Who's going to be a part of the RAM movement? And we've got a question from Hikwa C, who asks, what will the role of young Americans be in the Renew America movement? Congressman.
That's where you need to be. If you look at the demographics, you know, that's where you're going, right? And you look at the belief systems, the patterns, and what I've seen from those who are younger, there's a huge liberty streak. And a lot of the people that I know, and back to the last question, it's part of where we want to be as everyone, right? Young Americans seem to be, and listen, I have 3 daughters. They seem to be much more tolerant of other lifestyles because they just don't give a rat's, right? As long as people aren't infringing on their liberties, they don't care. And I've said this before, I don't care if you're a Christian, I don't care if you're Muslim, I don't care if you're Hindu or Buddhist or Sikh, you have a place at the table, right? When you have a country as great at this. I also don't care if you don't believe in any of that. I don't care if you're an atheist. As long as you care about liberties and this American ideal we have, that we have freedom of thought and we can do what we want to do. Hell, I don't care if you worship a head of lettuce. I really don't care. What I care about is that you treat other people with dignity and respect going forward. And I think that's why young Americans are so actually important. And I hope I can still consider myself young, but I would be lying to myself if I said that. So when I'm looking down, at ages of 18 to 35 or 40, it's amazing to me that we have this seismic shift in what liberty is. Religion's important. We're based on religious liberty, but the most important thing is the freedom of the individual to act and believe how they want to act and believe. And that's what I ran on. I got in trouble with that kind of liberty type of thinking, but I'm going to stick with it. And again, Susan and Michael are right.
Yeah, great. Appreciate that, Congressman. We have a live question coming in from Mark Y, who asks, what do you think the short-term plan is? Is it to primary Trump Republicans, or is it to build a movement to run someone in 2024? Maybe both. I'll put that to the panel, maybe starting with you, Susan.
I think it could be both. I think that you have to look at, there is something happening at the state level. When we opened up this town hall, Governor Weld said he thinks that things are much worse now that Trump is out of power. He's more scared today than he was then. And I see that on the state party level. And that's what concerns me, is that one thing that Trump did very well was seep into that state party. And Michael Steele certainly knows what that's all about. And that dictates so much. And we are going to see some short-term losses, meaning we're not going to have the best people we can running out of the Republican Party as independents. But you've got to stick with it. We've got to stay there, because I believe those chairmen will be cycled out by 2026, if not 2024, because they're going to keep losing important swing districts. Now, in deep red states or deep red districts, it's a different issue. So it depends on what you want to tackle. But right now, it really is getting as many voices into this movement as possible and using them as a collective, because if we move together district by district, we can really have a tremendous effect.
Yeah, if I could jump on top of the point that Susan just made, it's so important. You look at it this way: it's flooding the zone. It's flooding the zone. It is bringing your best set of ideas, energy, efforts to supporting a candidate, supporting a national conversation like we're having tonight, supporting, incumbents, some of whom were mentioned in this town hall tonight, like a Liz Cheney, who stood in the right space and at the right time to stand with the country and to stand with the American people, but then was penalized for that, for those inside the party, stripped of leadership, threatened with challenges at primary, condemned at their state party conventions. Stand with those individuals as well. Create that wall, if you will, since they like walls. Let's create that wall that will stop their attack on this democracy of ours. So I see that Susan's touched on a lot of important ways in which this will work and play itself out. And it is a little bit of everything right now. You just can't do this. Well, let's do step one first, and then we'll wait, and then we'll do step two. No, this is multitasking. This is asymmetrical politics, which I love, by the way, because it's the kind of thing where your opponents don't necessarily see you coming. And when they do think you're coming, you're not coming the way they think you're coming. So there's a lot of strategy there for smart people like Susan who plot all that stuff out and get it done. And then you have guys like Denver and myself who are like, okay, just point me in the right direction.
Point and shoot, man.
And I'm ready to go.
Yeah,
point and shoot.
Point and shoot. Well, it is about preparing the battlefield, right? And that's what we're doing here, right, with the Renew America movement, is that you're getting numbers, you're putting your message out there. And once you prepare the battlefield, then you go to elections, you have open primaries, you do those type of things. And then you start to gather your resources to resupply the troops in the field, right, as you prepare the battlefield. And I think that's what we're doing right now. I think it is an asymmetric battle space, but I think we can do a lot of these things in parallel. And I really can't build too much more on what Susan and Michael to say, except for this. sometimes a frontal assault works. And I think, again, we're going to have to be politely confrontational, or sometimes not so politely confrontational, when we're dealing with the type of disinformation that we have in the battle space right now.
So Terry N asks a good question that I think fits into this conversation. As we strive to increase the reach of this movement and bring more awareness, what are the things that ordinary citizens can do that help the most? Is it spreading links online, manning phone banks, donating time and money? I'll take this first, and I'm happy for others to jump in. Terry, it's all of the above. And I'll say we've got two prongs right now. We are launching this movement, and we are building a base for this movement. So yes, people who are able to donate, whether it's $2, $5, $10, that's going straight into the fight, and straight into the fight to help candidates who are good principled candidates win public office. And I'll tease something else that we're likely to announce in the coming weeks and hopefully next month. We are going to announce a slate of candidates around the country, existing office holders who we are going to be defending, but also people who are going to be running in races against extremists who right now do not know they're going to either have a primary challenger or a very competitive third-party candidate running against him. We've got some big announcements in the pipeline. We are excited about that, but there's going to be races that right now people think are not in play that are going to be in play because of this movement. So I say that because those will be opportunities for you to get engaged. When we announce those candidates, we want you to go support those candidates, knock on doors for them, really get out there. You are the renewers. Go out there and support the Renew candidates. And that's going to be the most important thing for you to be able to do to contribute to this movement. We have another question that I want to put to the group. Walter R. asks, what can this group do to call out or counteract the wave of big lie-inspired voter suppression legislation? I'm going to throw that one to the group. Free for all.
Sure. You want me to start? I know that's scary.
Go ahead, Congressman.
When you look at what's going on with the big lie or disinformation that's sort of metastasized and been baked into a large part of the Republican electorate, I think we got to do something. I have something pretty specific. I think we need to use the First Amendment as a cudgel against people who are using the First Amendment for nefarious ways. And what I mean to say is, it's almost like we need private-public partnerships or a Center for Disinformation Defense to actually push out there to look at this, where we actually kludge or we aggregate all these different areas and data to see where this disinformation is coming from. And we can do this while protecting civil liberties and constitutional liberties. And I think when you see this all across, certain segments of society, when you look at the polling and and I know Susan and Michael have seen the polling on people who believe that the election has been stolen. This is a very frightening time for the United States. And what scares me is that when you talk about, I think Michael or Susan were talking about Bill Weld talking about being more afraid now than they were before Trump was in office. I am too, because we're seeing that data. So I think it really is fighting disinformation on their battlefield and attacking it. I think that's the best thing we can do right now.
Yeah,
Michael, Susan.
Yeah, I was gonna echo what Denver said. I think that right now is the most pressing thing, is really beginning to push back against the narrative. It kind of reminds me of that scene with Cher in the movie Moonstruck, when she hauls off and smacks the crap. Snap out of it. That's what we're talking about. That's a little bit of that ram in this movement, is to Denver. It's done, baby. It's kind of.
I feel like this is yes.
I think so. I'm just telling you, it's going to stick. Yeah. But it's a lot like that. That's what the hell are you talking about? Daggone well, that's not true. And just really pushing back. Here's the second piece of this. And it is the one thing among several things that have galled me to no end, is that throughout all of this, all of these people who perpetuated the big lie, all these people who perpetuated the narrative after post January 6th that it was just a tourist event. Those who stood with righteous indignation on January 6th, calling out the president and calling out those members who were giving the fist up and all of the to the Proud Boys, suddenly slinked away and didn't have much to say anymore. All of those folks, there have been no consequences. They've not paid a price for their retreat from democracy. They've not paid a price for their throwing our democracy under the bus, for their trying to overthrow our government, for their pushing a lie that they know is a lie. So we need all of us now for them to pay a price. And that's what Denver's talking about. That's how you begin to do that, to push those words back, use that First Amendment as a cudgel, and other efforts to let them know, meaning, for example, you're gonna get primaried, baby. We coming for you, right? There is a price when you turn your back on democracy. And it's not the one we, the people, are gonna pay. It's the one that you're gonna pay for perpetuating a lie and damaging the goodness of our democracy.
Yeah, but if you want to fight that big fight, I agree with Denver and Michael, but there's something else you need to do. You need to do it to people other than who are on this call right now. We tend to get our information in silos. We follow the people on Twitter that we like. You watch the news networks that you like. You communicate, and people are informed in silos. So get down on the community level. Have someone join the next town hall that we have. Or maybe just start sharing in communications, like information that is considered not as political. But we have to start breaking out of where we're comfortable in talking about this among ourselves and really start talking to our neighbors. Because I do think one really big positive, without the former guy being around, is temperatures have cooled. Mm-hmm. So we can fight those tough primaries. I agree with Micah, like I am all in for that. But at the same time, we need to speak with members of our community and start talking about things like, how can you really not be, like, how can you not support voters' rights? Like, are you aware of this? These are things that touch people personally. So I would look for that interaction at the community level as well and break out of your silo.
Well, Susan, I think that's a great point for us to end on. We are at time here on our panel, and I'll close by just saying we're very excited to announce the movement. We've got a lot of other very energizing announcements to come, but in the immediate, go to renewamericamovement.com, sign up, get involved, spread the word online, let people know that you are a renewer, and the silent majority in this country of moderates and principled voters now have a political tribe. We thank you, Chairman Steele. We thank you, Congressman Riggleman, for joining this panel. Thank you, Susan, for your incisive comments. All three of you, we appreciate it. And now I'm going to hand it back over to Marianne to continue us forward.
Thank you, Miles, and a special thank you to Michael Steele, Denver Riggleman, and Susan Del Percio for an incredibly lively conversation about the Renew America movement. It's safe to say we're not the only ones around here excited about the Renew America movement. Let's go to Zoe from Arizona and Kekua from Hawaii.
I am a wife, a mother, and a career professional. My father served in Vietnam. My husband served in the Army, and now I feel like it's my turn to serve our country. I had the honor of volunteering on Senator McCain's last campaign, and yet I stood silent while he and other veterans in my life were attacked. I stood on the sidelines while my neighbors, my family, my friends were all attacked with vile rhetoric, all in the name of patriotism. I have 2 sons, and I have to stand up for them and our country and our principles. They need to know that being a conservative isn't angry name calling. They need to understand how to have a constructive conversation about policy and how it's going to impact their lives. I want to support leaders with integrity. It's my turn to stand up to extremism. It's the legacy I want to leave for my children.
Aloha, my name is Kekua-chan, and I'm from Honolulu, Hawaii. The reason I joined a call for American Renewal is because I wanted a place in which I could build a strong foundation in civic duty, civic responsibility. As a member of the next generation of leaders, I think it's so important that youth participate and make themselves heard in our government and our democracy. That's why I'm so optimistic about the future of our country, because there are so many of my peers who are out there in different movements across the political spectrum who are making themselves heard, who are providing leadership, who are doing the things that are necessary to represent themselves and represent their communities in this democracy. And I can see that a call for American Renewal is a great opportunity for youth to do that as well, and for youth to get involved and to make themselves heard in our democracy as well.
Thank you, Zoe and Kekua. Now we'll hear from Justin from Colorado and Lynn from Missouri on how the Renew America movement is instrumental to catalyze a better way forward for our nation.
Hi, I'm Justin Kurth from Colorado. And one of the challenges I think we face is that until America is no longer limited by a two-party system, one national priority must be the wellness of our two major parties. I left the GOP in 2019 after nearly 15 years as a Republican, time that included a position in the state party leadership. I made that decision after witnessing the seemingly bottomless erosion of values from within. And since then, I've committed myself to the wellness effort in the Democratic Party, a commitment that I take as seriously as when I enlisted to defend this nation. Yet I understand a rescue of Lincoln's Republican Party must be attempted by the political right so America can return our national political discussion to the center to re-engage in the competition of ideas. This will serve to move us toward a future as a united people, and the Renew America movement is what our nation needs to begin this process so that we can focus on defending our country from extremism and our political institutions, because doing so, despite our differences, serves to elevate the best version of ourselves and our American ideals.
Hi, my name is Lynn. I'm speaking to you from the middle of the country, from the state of Missouri. I am so excited for the kickoff of the Renew America movement. At a time when our very democracy is being attacked, it is great to join others who also believe in truth and the rule of law. I look forward to meeting and working with all of you.
Thank you, Justin and Lynn. Finally, I'd like to introduce tonight Renew America co-founder and former presidential candidate, Evan McMullin.
Thank you, Mariana, and thank you very much for hosting our town hall tonight. Thank you to our excellent panelists and speakers, and to all of you for tuning in and for sticking with us through this event. We're so excited to announce this new organization. We're so excited to invite you to this cause, to Renew America, to the Renew America movement. We invite all of you once again to join by visiting renewamericamovement.com and signing up for updates from us and to get involved around the country. I know you've been listening to a lot of different people speak, and you've submitted your own questions, which have been very insightful. But I want to just share a few thoughts with you as we finish up our town hall tonight. One is that, look, many of us have felt isolated and politically homeless in recent years, at least, some of us longer. And that can lead to despair and frustration as we see extremism, political polarization, and a lack of commitment to truth threaten our democracy and lead to dysfunction and to gridlock and now violence, threatening again the health of the republic. That, of course, can lead to that despair and to that frustration. But I want to share my optimism with you, knowing that as big as those challenges are, what comes with them is a corresponding opportunity for renewal and for rebirth in our republic. And if you're someone who has felt politically homeless, then you are also somebody in whom we know the potential for renewal and rebirth in America rests. You cast the deciding votes in the most competitive elections around the country. You decide who holds majority power in the Senate or in the House, or who controls the White House. You are the deciders. And so instead of that despair, instead of that frustration and that isolation, I hope we can push that aside and replace it with a tremendous sense of optimism and hope for the future. I certainly have that. And the Renew America movement is a way that we can organize around the country and ensure that our voices are heard and that our will is reflected in electoral outcomes around the country. We will do that. In the future, in the weeks and months ahead, we'll announce campaigns and elections that we intend to impact, supporting good candidates, good leaders who are committed to truth, committed to our democracy, committed to common sense, evidence-based leadership. And we will decide, I firmly believe, who holds power in Washington in the years to come. We need to organize. We need to build, organize in every corner of the country. We need to elevate enlisting and supporting, electing leaders who share our values, the values that are found in a call for American renewal, which you can find at the renewamericamovement.com and read if you haven't already. This is our opportunity to make a change. After January 6th and other examples of political deterioration in the United States, we have this tremendous opportunity to bring about change, to build a brighter future for the country. And as bad as things have gotten, I have to tell you, I've never been more optimistic that we can do exactly what I'm saying, that we can bring about this renewal. So please go to renewamericamovement.com, sign up, join us. We'll need your support every step of the way on many fronts. We'll need you to step up to support candidates around the country, to lend your voices, to lend your time and resources. But we can do this together. Many of you have been doing that for years. Others are new to the cause. We welcome all. Some of us oppose Donald Trump. Some of us have supported Donald Trump. But we are united now by the principles contained in a call for American renewal and by our common goal to bring about a new direction, a healthier democracy in America, to preserve the republic for our future generations, to receive the blessings of our forefathers and foremothers' sacrifices for our nation together. That is our calling. That is our mission. We invite all to the cause. I am so thrilled and honored to be with you in this cause, and I look forward to our next steps. So stay tuned, sign up to be with us. Again, go to renewamericamovement.com, and we look forward to being in touch. And with that, I'll wish you good night and be well.